Hare Krishna, welcome to Bhagavad Gita class on chapter 17, the divisions of faith. So we will start our discussion on Bhagavad Gita. We are nearing the end, chapter 17. This is the second last chapter. And before we get started, let us recite the Mangalacharan prayers. These are the prayers given at the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita as it is in the introduction. So, yeah, okay. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shrivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, chapter 17. We are inching closer to the finish line. As usual, I would request all of you to find a nice quiet place to dedicate these 2 hours into the discussion on Bhagavad Gita. There's no scripture that is more profound, more instructive for our life than the Bhagavad Gita. So please, I find it very enjoyable to prepare for these classes, and I hope you can also enjoy reading it. And if possible, turn on your video, at least now or whenever you feel comfortable. It'll be nice to see you. If not, that's okay. But if possible, then yes. There are a couple of things that we will do today. We will obviously discuss the 17th chapter. And we will also be doing we'll spend a lot of time on questions and answers. So please prepare. If you have questions, please keep them ready. I really want to spend a lot of time on Q&A on any portion of Bhagavad Gita or in its application as well. So we have been focusing so much on applying Bhagavad Gita. So there may be a lot of questions. I know some people sent us some questions expecting us to reply to them privately. But these questions are so important that we feel that, I mean, if 20 different people ask the same question, it's not going to be possible for me to reply same thing, even if it is just cut pasting the reply to so many. It's best if you may not realize how many people may have the same question. So somebody is waiting for somebody else to ask it. Mostly, the people feel shy to ask questions, but be the one who is little brave to stick out your neck and ask. You may feel it's a stupid question, silly question. Don't worry. No question is silly. You will thank yourself. I will thank you, and others will thank you. So we'll be doing, I intend to spend time on Q&A. Now, it may be possible that everybody will be quiet and there will not be questions. We'll see what happens. I hope that won't happen. The other thing that I would like to spend time on today, since we are coming close to the ending, is, and you've been through this journey, for you to share with me where you are currently in your journey in applying Bhagavad Gita. And I would really like to hear from you where you are. And from there, I can pick up things that worked well, that did not work well, things that we can improve going forward. And, it's also a mechanism for feedback for me. And I really like to know what was the effect of this whole discussion that we have had for half a year and more on your life. And so that will be the second part, and I won't record that. So whatever you say will be private in this group. It won't get posted on YouTube. And so you can, I would request you to share freely as in, like, at least with this group. It won't be on public media. And then the third thing, very important, extremely important announcement I will be making towards the end of the class. So please stay tuned for that. If you're somebody who may be interested in that kind of an announcement, you will regret missing it. So please stay towards the end, and there'll be a announcement. This is not a bait to keep you till the end. I know that many of you do stay for the whole 2 hours, but I will make an announcement of an important update. You don't want to miss that. But that won't be recorded. That will be after the recording is stopped for the sharing. Okay. So those are the things that I wanted to cover. Just quick things before we get started again. I forgot to, now I know many of you attend the Srimad Bhagavatam class that happens on Saturday, the one that happened yesterday, where we discussed the pastime of the disappearance of Lord Sri Krishna. I forgot to make the announcement yesterday that next Saturday there will not be a Bhagavatam class. I have something scheduled. So since I thought that the devotees who are attending, are mostly common, just I want to let you know there is no Bhagavatam class next Saturday evening. There will be Bhagavad Gita class. So this is not for the Bhagavad Gita class cancellation next week. Bhagavad Gita class will be there. Whoever is, listening, please listen carefully. Bhagavad Gita class will be there. Just that the Bhagavatam one is not there. And one final thing, and I will, one final thing, next week, next Sunday will be the time change for United States, daylight saving time. So if you're attending, we are in an online format. I really am regretting that I don't know many of you. And that's also my intent through the sharing, to know some of you and what you're, how this has helped you and all that. So I don't even know where you're from in the world. So if you're from a place that doesn't follow this daylight saving thing and all that, then the time will change for you. Please keep track of time. In the United States, we move 1 hour ahead. So, you can do the math. Google is your friend. You can Google and find out what time it is for you and all that. But there'll be a time change next Sunday. For those of you in the United States that follow daylight saving, no change for you. It'll still be at 4 o'clock your time. Any other announcement?
4 o'clock is for Portland.
What's that?
The 4 o'clock timing is for Portland.
Yes, 4 o'clock Pacific time. Okay, good. So we will get started with all that said. We will get started with chapter 17, the divisions of faith. So before we start into the chapter, just a quick intro on what this chapter is about, so that you can uh, listen or read this chapter with that mindset, with that context. So, overview of the chapter. This is again something important that I have usually tried to explain at the beginning of the chapters. So, chapter 16 talked about divine and demoniac nature, Daivi and Asuri natures. And the divine nature mostly is in the mode of goodness and beyond. So those who are in the mode in the mode of goodness are like divine beings, and usually the demoniac natures is in extreme mode of passion and even further down mode of ignorance. And there is a gradual scaling, as we had discussed last time. The fall down doesn't happen like in a quantum jump, that you are a good person and suddenly tomorrow when you wake up you're suddenly a serial killer. It doesn't happen that way. The decline is always gradual, starts with small things, and one thing leads to the other, and then soon enough you find yourself, oh my god, where have I come? How did I end up here? So it's a gradual scale. And in this whole scale of things, the natural so before I go to the next aspect, but I just want to mention this. This is sort of the essence of the 17th chapter, that the natural question arises, where am I on this scale? Am I divine? Am I demoniac? And I said it's not binary, it's not 0 or 1. I could be in anywhere in that whole spectrum of gray. How much divine I am, how much demoniac I am. Or you can think, am I really in the mode of goodness or mode of passion or mode of ignorance? So these questions may come up. And as we had discussed in chapter 14, these modes are also not binary, that are like, mutually exclusive. Like if you are in a mode of goodness, that's all you are in. I'm just trying to recap for you. We are these modes are constantly acting upon us based on situation, time, place, our mental state, even time of day, and so many other things. So we can be in a it's like a RGB colors. You mix three colors, red, green, blue, in different proportions, and you can get millions of colors by mixing them into different proportions. So this goodness, passion, and ignorance can give us our nature or our state of mind at any time, depending on which of the three is dominant, which is less dominant, and which is least dominant. So in whatever proportion. So you may ask the question, in general, for me, which one is dominant throughout one's life or in big portions of one's life? Typically, one is in a particular dominant mode. And unless you try to work on it, you will generally stay, that mode will become more dominant. Generally, there may be moments. So, like, and we said, 99% of people today in Kali Yuga are in the mode of passion. Generally, it doesn't mean that there won't be times when they are in mode of goodness, when they are with their loved ones, when they are with some of their closest best friends, they may become in mode of goodness. But general tendency could be, one of the three modes: mode of passion or mode of ignorance or mode of goodness. So that is also there. A general domination of a given mode is there unless you work hard to change it. A very good way to explain it in that I use often is that it's like, on a road, on a highway, when you're driving your car, you might see some grooves that are made on the highway in the middle of a lane, right? And you can almost, leave your steering wheel, uh, and because of those grooves, the car keeps just moving uh, in the lane, because there is that little depression in the highway, because all cars have been moving for such a long time in that particular area within the lane. And if you have to go away from that grooves, you have to put pressure on the steering wheel, and then you can change the lane, or you can do something like that. So due to constant, so many millions of cars have driven on that lane in that particular position, it starts getting reinforced and reinforced and reinforced till a point it becomes like you don't even have to move the steering wheel, and it still keeps going. So that is the like the dominant mode. And you have to put some pressure, you have to put some force, which means in your life you have to apply some changes in your life if you want to change your dominant mode from one to the other. And when I say again dominant, it means at certain generally at most times. It doesn't mean that that's the only way that you can be. You can be in other ways as well, depending on time, place, who you are with, what's your state of mind, etc. So then the question can arise, and then we saw, like, in the divine and demoniac natures, how you can be, in that spectrum. And then the question can arise, where am I in this spectrum? So this chapter 17, a good part of this chapter will allow you to detect where you are in these modes. Now you could look at the qualities that were described in chapter 14. A few qualities were described, but mainly what was described is the nature itself, and what is the destination, where do they go, how the modes change and work on each other, and so on. So it was sort of the theory of the three modes, the three gunas. But here it will be all about the symptoms, the how a person looks. When looks means not just by facial looks, but the general symptoms of a person in those three modes. So here's what I usually say to the students. The chapter 17 is, listen carefully now, chapter 17 is like a self-assessment questionnaire. You can think of it like a Krishna is giving you a self-assessment questionnaire, a questionnaire where you say, mark the answers that are most applicable to you. You say, and there'll be a lot of things, and you can say, I think I'm in this category, in this question. In this question, I'm here. In this question, I'm here. In this question, I'm here. Like in a doctor's office, when you go, they give you a questionnaire in the beginning. And then they say that at the end, your total score, add up all the whatever, yeses or nos or something like that, and you'll get a total score. So like this, similarly, you can almost convert it into a questionnaire. Maybe someday I will create a document, a PDF document with the verses from chapter 17, and convert it into a real questionnaire. But I want to stay away from such gimmicks. I don't want to convert Bhagavad Gita into such a gimmick kind. It's not a gimmick, but again, I'll see if I can do it in a more sincere and sober way. I might do it. But so far I haven't done it. But you can treat it, you can take chapter 17, open it and read it verse by verse, and say, here is where I am. Here is where I am on this verse. Here is where I am on this verse. Here is where I am on this verse. And when you go through the chapter 17, you will get a pretty good idea based on the answers you have given, that generally you are a person in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. And this is a way for you to do that self-assessment. So chapter 17 can be looked at. There are two ways of looking at chapter 17. Two ways. I'm describing one of the ways, and that is to look at it as a self-assessment quiz or a self-assessment questionnaire. The second way to look at it is, after you have done the assessment, and let's say you will figure out, aha, I am in the mode of passion. Most likely that's what will be the result for most people, because that's what is said. In Kali Yuga, 99% of the people are in the mode of passion. Now you will see what it takes to go into mode of goodness, at least from the symptoms standpoint. Of course, it takes internally to become a good person. This is the force that you have to apply on the steering wheel. So you can think, okay, in this particular question, I marked this thing. What does it take for me in this particular area of my life to go from passion to goodness? because that's the goal, to go to goodness, isn't it? Unless you want to go into ignorance, in which case probably that's not the case, because you're still here in the Bhagavad Gita class. Otherwise you would have dropped out many weeks ago already. So if you have made it so far, I am assuming you're all very interested in going into the mode of goodness, and from the mode of goodness going into transcendence, transcending the three modes, going beyond the three modes. A very nice way to think about, again, somebody had asked this question and I want to clarify. Going into mode of goodness, or being in the mode of goodness, is the best way to go into transcendence, or in other words, to do bhakti yoga, because Bhagavad Gita is all about bhakti yoga. So it's like this, that if you want to take a flight, the best way to take a flight is to go to the airport. If you don't go to the airport, how will you take a flight? But just going to the airport is not enough. You have to actually sit in the flight. But going to the airport is the best way to be able to sit in the flight. So you can be in the mode of goodness and never transcend it, never go beyond it. That way you will stay in the mode of goodness. It means like being in the airport and coming back home, not taking the flight. Okay, but if you really want to take the flight, guess what? You must go to the airport. Now, there can be some very rare cases where you could be airlifted directly from home. You call 911 and you say, I'm having a heart attack, and a helicopter will come and airlift you, or something like that. That is the mercy of the government. So similarly, you may study in Bhagavatam that there is mercy of the Lord on some people who are not in the mode of goodness, and they get the mercy and they get airlifted. But we must not plan for that. Okay, our plan to take the flight should not be to get airlifted, because that is so rare. Our plan to take the flight should be to go to the airport, which means to come to the mode of goodness. Then it is very easy to go to to take the flight. Okay. So the second part of this chapter is how to go to the mode of goodness, how to change our lifestyle, to change our habits, and what to change it to. What specific changes to make in our life, so that it will propel us into the mode of goodness. Okay, so that is the sort of the essence, the main part, bulk of the chapter talks about that. Now, just the linkage. So that's one thing. Now, the link between chapters 16 and 17 is that where did chapter 16 end? Anybody remembers? What was the last main concept of chapter 16?
What are the do's and don'ts?
What are the do's and don'ts? Okay, said differently, there is a very important concept, a focus of the last.
What's
Attachment.
duty and what's not duty?
Attachment.
That is the previous two verses. See, chapter 16 has 24 verses. Attachments and do's and don'ts are about verse number 21, 22.
What is duty and what is not duty?
Scriptures.
By the
You have to follow the
regulations of
scriptures.
Scriptures. Yes, 23 and 24, the main concept is to follow scriptures. Shastra Vidhi, the significance of scriptures. Yes, exactly. So that was the focus of the very last two verses of the 16th chapter, because from the scriptures you get the same knowledge which is there about divine nature and giving up attachments and all that, but the focus was scriptures. So Arjuna is asking a question. So most of the chapters of Bhagavad Gita start with, or many chapters, not most, but many chapters start with a question by Arjuna. Arjuna is asking a question: what happens to those people who do not follow the scriptures? Okay, so because the scriptures were mentioned, and those who do not have faith on the scriptures. So the question is sort of two-folded. It's a question on faith and scriptures. So when we say you have to, and this we have discussed, I'm just going unmute somebody who's unmuted. We have discussed this in the past several classes, especially in the discussion of verse 9.3. 9.3 is a very important verse on Shraddha. So if you want to discuss or understand Shraddha or faith, you should go and read the purport by Srila Prabhupada on 9.3, and you can hear our discussion that we had of 9.3 as well from the recordings. But there we mentioned that faith means faith on scriptures. That's the true faith that you must have, faith on scriptures. And that is why that link is coming from here. Arjuna is asking, what happens to those people who do not put their faith? Or who, one way to ask would have been, what happens to those people who do not have faith, period? No, that's not what he's asking. What he's asking is, what happens to those who do not have faith in the scriptures? Because he understands that the faith really means faith on scriptures. So that's how the question this chapter starts. What happens to the people who are not having faith in the scriptures? So text 1, Arjuna uvacha ye shastra vidhim utsrijya yajante shraddhayanvitah tesham nishtha tuka Krishna satyamaho rajastamaha. So what is the dissection of this verse? We will break it up. Ye shastra vidhim utsrijya. So shastra vidhi, the procedures and the principles, concepts in the shastras. Utsrijya means one who has given up or one who has rejected or disregarded. So what happens? Yajante shraddhaya anvitah. And so what happens to these, that he will say what happens as in like in the next line. But those who reject the scriptures and they worship, yajante, they still do some worship, which means, and I will explain what is the meaning of worship. Shraddhaya anvitah. Anvitah means they are having some belief, they are having some faith, shraddha, but worship in something else, not in the Shastra Vidhi, not the Shastra Vidhi, but something else which is self-manufactured. It could be self-manufactured or told by their friends or father, grandfather, whoever, but it's definitely not Shastra. Tesham nishtha tu ka Krishna. What is their kind of faith? What is their kind of nishtha? Nishtha means their determination. Where is it, Lord Krishna, oh my Krishna? Sattvam aho rajas tama. Are they in mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance? So that is the question that is being asked. So one point to note is that what is really the meaning of faith here? Faith is always in some kind of idea. That is faith. I believe in something. Now, when Krishna says you must have faith, he is meaning you must have faith in scriptures. But in general, all people have faith in something by which they are leading their life. Some people may say, my faith is hard work. I will work hard and I know that is my formula for success. Some people will say, my faith is earning money by hook or crook. Somehow my goal is to become rich. Whatever, I don't want to go into a detailed discussion, but somewhere their faith is. So what Arjuna is asking is, what if a person, what happens, or what is the mode or the guna? Is he in goodness, passion, or ignorance? If a person's faith is not coming from Shastras, but is coming from elsewhere. So Srila Prabhupada is translating it. Arjuna inquired, "O Krishna, what is the situation of those who do not follow the principles of scripture, but worship according to their own imagination? Are they in goodness, passion, or ignorance?" Okay. So they basically those who disregard the scriptures and manufacture their own faith. Then Lord Krishna begins to reply. Now, the rest of the chapter is Lord Krishna's reply. There is no more verses by Arjuna. So first, in the next two verses, 2 and 3, are very important to understand. Very key verses, not key in the sense to remember or memorize, but very conceptually important to grasp, or a little hard to grasp as well. So listen carefully. So these two verses are going to describe the relationship between one's faith and guna, or the mode, passion, ignorance, goodness, passion, ignorance. The relationship between the faith and the gunas. How the faith is influenced by the gunas, and then how the gunas are influenced or are exhibited based on one's faith. So it is from faith, or from gunas to faith to gunas. That is what you need to understand. So pay attention. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Trividha Bhavati Shraddha. Oops, sorry. Clicked the wrong button. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Trividha Bhavati Shraddha Dehinam Sasvabhavaja Satviki Rajasi Chaiva Tamasi Cheti Tam Shrinu. So, Shri Bhagavan Vacha, Lord Krishna says, Trividha Bhavati Shraddha. So, the Shraddha, the faith itself, is of three types, Trividha, three types. So, what are they? And it is according to Dehinam Sa Swabhavaja, that this faith is given by one's Swabhava. Swabhava means one's inherent nature. This and the nature of the soul, or the conditioning of the soul. Dehinam. Dehinam means the soul. Deha means the body. Dehi, as we had discussed long back in chapter 2 itself, means the occupier or resident of the Deha. Who is the resident of the Deha? The soul. And the soul is conditioned by the modes. The soul has the conditioning. And that is what is being mentioned here, that the Dehinam Sa Swabhavaja, that conditioning, that long period of conditioning of the soul, has their faith based on three types, Trividha Bhavati Shraddha. And this can be in three categories: Satviki, Rajasi, Chaiva, Tamasi, Cheti, Cha iti Tam Shrinu. These can be in goodness, passion, or ignorance, Satviki, Rajasi, and Tamasi. And Tam Shrinu, now you hear from me. So Lord Krishna is saying, I will tell you, and the third verse he will clarify. The third verse is the complicated one, which I will try to explain. So basically, the thing to understand from this verse is Dehinam Sa Swabhavaja, the second quartlet, which means that the soul is conditioned by, it has undergone many, many lifetimes of conditioning. And that conditioning has been done by, of course, the senses and the sense objects that they have associated with, and the mind, which has taken them towards the various types of enjoyments that it wanted to do. And then the soul has been fed with that kind of enjoyment, and the soul becomes conditioned. The soul begins to acquire a taste. Okay, maybe this is the only enjoyment I can get. It forgets that there is a higher enjoyment. And then it begins to just tolerate, it begins to just accept whatever enjoyment, material enjoyment, is being thrown at it by the mind, by the senses, and by the intelligence. So it acquires a particular type of behavior, a particular type of swabhava. So that is what is being mentioned. This is the conditioning of the soul that has happened over a very, very, very long time. The next verse will say that conditioning gives rise to the faith in a particular mode. This type of conditioning is the source of one's faith. So let's go to verse number 3. Okay, so the translation by Srila Prabhupada of verse number 2 is: the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, according to the modes of nature acquired by the embodied soul, one's faith can be of three kinds: in goodness, passion, or in ignorance. Now hear about this. Tam Shrinu. So according to the modes of nature acquired by the soul, the conditioning of the soul, that results in the faith of three kinds. So that's what I was trying to explain. Okay. So third verse. Sattvanurupa sarvasya shraddha bhavati bharata shraddha mayoyam purusho yo yat shraddha cha eva saha. So Srila Prabhupada's translation is, O son of Bharata, according to one's existence under the various modes of nature, one evolves a particular kind of faith. The living being is said to be of a particular kind of faith according to the modes he has acquired. So, Sattvanurupa Sarvasya Shraddha Bhavati Bharata. That according to one's faith evolves according to one's existence in the three modes, according to one's existence, Sattvanurupa. Shraddha Bhavati, that faith comes from that conditioning. And then Shraddha Mayo Ayam Purusho Yo Yat Shraddha Cha Evasa, that the faith itself, Shraddha itself, is said to be in that particular mode in which it has evolved. So this is the complicated part, but the essence of this is that by association with the various modes and with the sense objects related to those modes, one attains his nature, and from that nature the Shraddha arises. And that Shraddha itself therefore arises in the similar kind of nature as you have associated with. Basically what it means is, what you feed in is what comes out. The kind of things that you have associated with in the past will show up in the future in your nature. So this chapter is going to show what is happening, what you are exhibiting, the symptoms. That is the connection to the symptoms. Because in this chapter, we will analyze how a person, what symptoms a person exhibits in the three modes. And here it is being resolved. What is the source of that? The source of that is all your past conditioning and all your past associations with the various modes. Now, one important thing to note here is that that association is voluntary. It's by choice. Nobody has forced that kind of association on you. And therefore, since it was voluntary, but that's water under the bridge, that's gone. And that's what has made who you are today. But because you know it is voluntary, it can be changed for the future. You can change your future. You can change your swabhava, your nature, by associating with the mode of goodness. If that's what you choose, you can change and go into the mode of goodness in the future. So that is the essence. How you came here, and the power is in your hands to change it in the future, and how to detect where you are today. So when we say faith, I want to have a small discussion on this topic. What is really the meaning of faith? Now, faith, it means, according to Krishna, is faith on scriptures. Let's keep that aside. I said everybody has some faith or the other, or faith in someone, something like that. What is really that faith that I'm talking about? Everyone is influenced by the modes. Everyone, even if it's the mode of goodness, everyone is influenced. And over time, our faith evolves based on our association with the modes. So what is that faith that we are in? Any ideas, any discussion?
Like, Prabhuji, faith means, like, we say tried and tested. Like, this thing works, like that.
Exactly, tried and tested. Or if I am to generalize a little more, it could mean, what are our values? We define our values and say, I followed that value, it turned out great for me, so let me follow those principles. those principles and values. That could be one's faith. What one aligns with or measure one's self against, my own personal yardstick. That is one's faith, correct? So people make up various kinds of faith. It's given by our conditioning, and through our upbringing, through our association, etc., we build up certain types of faith. And the faith can be in something, some idea, or a person as well who embodies that idea. Aha. Because it's very much easier to associate ourselves with a role model, like a person. Oh, I should be like him because he's like a real life example. As human beings, we are very good with examples. We like examples. Even in math, if I just told you the theorems, it's very hard unless you do some solved examples. So examples show how to apply the idea. So when you have a role model, a person, he really shows you how to be that kind of idea. He is that idea personified. So role models could also be an object of faith. I have my faith in that person. So it could be ideas, it could be a person. So let me say something more, then I will ask a question. So this faith itself, the idea, the kind of idea you put your faith in, or the kind of person who embodies that idea that you put your faith in, can be in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. So when you result, or when you associate with a good idea or a good person who embodies that good idea, your faith that you develop is also in the mode of goodness. Similarly, if you associate with some idea or person who embodies the mode of passion, you will get similar ideas as well. You will try to, you will automatically become like that. It will rub off on you. And similarly for mode of ignorance. So the essence is that your association gives rise to whatever you begin to value in your life, whatever you start considering to be your guiding posts, guiding principles. So now I would like to ask you some examples in life, and this may require some courage for some of you to stand up and say something. Think of some examples of where or in whom you may have put your faith. Anything you want to share?
With our parents and with their experiences.
Great. With our, we can say, tradition, whatever is given by our parents and whatever they have taught us. If parents were very truthful, they become our ideals. If parents are doing all kind of cheating, then say we also think, oh, it's okay. They turned out to be fine. They didn't go to jail. So maybe I can also, be like that. Whatever. So yes, our upbringing, our tradition. Anything else?
Teachers, Prabhuji.
Teachers, yes. Anything else? But these are the categories. But I am speaking more in terms of the for the categorization. These are the categories of people, but I'm talking about the faith in terms of goodness, passion, ignorance. What are some of those things? Or some real life examples?
Different types of worshiping. I mean,
okay. So just as an example, I will mention it's, again, from recent politics. So many people put their faith in one particular leader. Okay. And that they identify with, oh yes, this person is saying the right things. I believe in these concepts. And now finally we have a person who is being able to say these kind of things. And you begin to identify with that person. He begins to influence your thoughts and becomes your role model. And then you strongly put your faith, and then it goes beyond a point where anything and everything that person says becomes a true fact in your life. there is such a strong association with a particular ideology or a particular person that then after a certain point you find yourself hard to disassociate, to rationalize and say, wait a minute, I have my own intelligence to, maybe that some things that are being said by so and so person may not be correct. That whole capacity then becomes lost. So that is that strong attraction or attachment to that idea or ideology or a person who embodies that ideology. Again, I don't want to take names, but that's fine. And okay, so we'll move on. The important part to discover or to realize here is that when you are putting your faith in an idea or a person that is not coming from Shastra, what is the risk? That is really the question for us. Because in the 16th chapter, it ended with Krishna saying, you must put your faith in the Shastra. And so far in these 3 verses, we have understood that we have faith somewhere. Either it could be in Shastra or elsewhere. And if it is elsewhere, it could be in the modes of goodness, passion, or ignorance. So if it is not in Shastra and it is somewhere else, what is the risk?
Yeah, Prabhuji, so that person or that idea will take over us, basically. Whether it is right or wrong, it will take us over.
What's the problem?
Then you may never transcend to the higher level. So you will go downfall, like
How is
after
that,
Christ.
is that guaranteed? That depends on the idea.
Idea.
With statistics, Prabhuji, I think it is guaranteed. Like the last class you said communism was a good idea, but because of lack of God consciousness, it failed.
Sure, but capitalism also is lack of God consciousness. But at least between those two, this one is surviving. Anyway, I'm not saying capitalism is any better or any worse, but okay. So what is the risk? So yes, I think you're getting close. So let me move on with the class. The risk is that that idea and that person who is embodying that idea is not coming from God. That is the risk. Well, let me explain. In that sense that there is a possibility, I think somebody said that it could lead to fall down. True, but what the way I want to say it is that there is a possibility that it could lead to fall down because the source is not perfect. The source is human. The source is not God. And that idea, if it fails, because you have put so much faith in that idea or that person, it could completely shatter you. It will be very hard for you to put your faith in something else. Isn't that true? Once burnt, twice shy, and those kind of, sayings. And you put all your heart, all your faith in one, the more you get invested, and then if it fails, the bigger is the shock, the bigger is the heartbreak. And then it will be very difficult for you to put your faith in something else. The harder you fall down, the more you will say, no, I am not gonna, trust anybody or anything ever again. And then you have deprived yourself the opportunity to come closer to Shastras ever in your life. And that is the risk. Therefore, Krishna is saying that from the beginning itself, put your faith in the Shastras. And if you are to trust Krishna, of course, just keep making a rational argument, Krishna could also fail you, but Krishna has never failed anyone. And that is why we are doing the study of the Bhagavatam and so many other scriptures to prove 100% that Krishna never fails anyone. So put your faith in the strongest possible, idea, the idea that never fails. And then you will never be disappointed. You will be successful by putting your idea or your faith in that particular idea. It will never fail you. And we have seen so many people put their ideas here or there. Communism, you said, one example. We see recent all these other examples, when the idea got failed. Oh, this guy is so big, he's always speaking the truth, this, that, or this. We see so many famous people, and then suddenly one day you realize they are in this severe kind of scandal. Some scandal is uncovered, and you say, wait a minute, I thought he was really a good guy, and all this nonsense is coming out, and it's true sometimes, and many times it's true, and we have seen all these cases happening, and the faith is shaken. So you begin to think, like, if this person is so bad, is there really any good person in the planet? And that is a very, very disappointing, very, very depressing feeling to have. Okay, so that is the discussion on faith. Now Krishna goes into the sort of the aspect of the questionnaire. So now, how to detect what is your where is your faith placed? So text number 4. Yajante satvika devan yaksharakshamsi rajasah pretan bhuta ganamschanye yajante tamasa janah. Men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods. Yajante satvika devan. So yajante means, you will see this word occur many places in this chapter, and it is occurring in this verse again. Yajante means to worship. Satvika, those in the mode of goodness, sattva guna, worship the devas, the devatas, the demigods. Yaksha rakshamsi rajasah, and those in the mode of passion worship the demons. Srila Prabhupada is translating the yaksha rakshamsi as the demons. So, and then pretan bhuta ganamscha anye yajante tamasah jana. And then those in the mode of ignorance, in the tamasa guna, worship the ghosts and the spirits, pretan and bhuta ganan, the pretas and bhutas. So Bhagavad Gita is clearly saying that these bhutas and pretas do exist, and the people in the mode of ignorance worship these kind of bhutas and pretas. So the demigods, so starting with the mode of goodness, they worship the demigods. So again, those who have transcended the mode of goodness worship Krishna. But those in the mode of goodness worship the demigods like Brahma, Chandra, Surya, etc. And the difference between these and the demons, the Yaksha Rakshamsi and Baladev, so a lot of wonderful explanations have been given about these various categories by in these two books. These are the two other commentaries of Bhagavad Gita, from which Srila Prabhupada has taken a lot of matter. This one is by Baladev Vidyabhushan, and this one is by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Both of them are great saints in our disciplic succession. And the entire Bhagavad Gita, as it is, if you remember, has been dedicated to Srila Baladev Vidyabhushan by Srila Prabhupada. And he has taken a lot of matter from the commentaries of these two acharyas, previous acharyas. However, and these two acharyas have given a lot of explanation, who are bhutas, who are pretas, and so on. But Srila Prabhupada has more or less skipped those aspects, because Srila Prabhupada's main focus of writing his commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita has been to arouse bhakti in one's heart, rather than trying to give a detailed explanation of who is bhuta, who is preta, who is this, who is that. It's not a detailed theory lesson on the verses of Bhagavad Gita, but to arouse bhakti through the Bhagavad Gita, which is the main purpose. So through these other commentaries, we can get more details if you are interested. I am also not going to go into much details about it, but I'm just pointing out, if you are interested, that's the source. you can go to, and these are again acharyas in our own disciplic succession. So no problem, you can safely read these commentaries and you will not get any incorrect understanding. These are very safe commentaries to read. There are many unsafe commentaries to read of Bhagavad Gita as well, which I would not advise you to go towards. So again, people in the mode of goodness go towards the demigods. Those in the mode of passion go towards the demons. These includes the Srila Baldev Vidyabhushan also says that they are a type of pishachas. Pishachas are the he writes people who have who are good in their previous life, but in that life they fell down very much, almost to a demoniac level. But because of their previous goodness, they don't become bhuta and preta, they become these kind of yaksharakshas. And then finally, the pretas and bhutas are people, you know, again, no need to go into a long discussion about them, but they are the ones who are not having a physical body. They are some very confused and very kind of souls. Typically some people also who commit suicide and all, they, you know, they don't get immediately a new body, a new physical body. They have the soul, which is covered by the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. So they have that subtle body and they don't have a physical body, and they live in that subtle body. So they are those kind of people. Now, again, coming back to mode of passion, what is being described here, in our modern day context, who do we consider as our worshipable entities? Now here in the fourth verse, basically, it's the embodiment of that idea that Lord Krishna is mentioning. These who to worship are the embodiments of that particular idea. So those are the devatas, the yaksharakshams, and the bhutas and pishachas. In the modern day context, who are these, at least in the mode of passion? Any examples? We already talked about some, but just I want to make sure. Who do you worship? In other words, is who do you treat as your role models? Who do you look up to? And when you say worship, it doesn't mean with an aarti tray and you do worship, but it really means worship mentally. You really begin to adore them. You begin to respect them fully. Modern day examples.
Rich persons, Prabhuji, basically.
Rich persons, yes, you do that. Very successful people, I would say. Today's these kind of, you know, Elon Musk's and Steve Jobs's of the day and all that. Politicians, business tycoons, corporate people, very intellectual people, sports personalities. So many people are crazy about, you know, LeBron James and Sachin Tendulkar's, and you know, I don't know who are the latest cricketers. Sachin Tendulkar is from my time. So whoever is the equivalent of Sachin Tendulkar these days, what's that guy? Virat Kohli. Yes, Virat Kohli and all that. So, you know, people begin to consider these as their role models to follow, make them the ideals of their life. That is what Krishna is talking about, that you worship these people. And you can go and look at these people, their lives. And, you know, if you go look closely, they may not be the best people. They will be many of them would be people of you know, you might discover some very serious character flaws in them. You know, remember the example of Tiger Woods or something several years ago. Some bad news came about him. Now, again, who knows what is right, what is wrong? Again, I'm not saying that whatever came in the news was right. Maybe the poor guy was right, and, you know, the media just, you know, converted him into a demon. Who knows? But again, the point is that when we put our faith in these earthly people, it is prone to getting shattered. That is the point to remember. Therefore, the point is, don't put your faith even in the demigods, even in the devatas. Put your faith in whom? I'm giving you the sort of the essence of that will come later. Who should we put our faith in?
Krishna.
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 Okay, but one more category.
Krishna.
Spiritual masters.
Devotees of Krishna.
Exactly, the pure devotees of Krishna. And spiritual master is a pure devotee of Krishna by definition. You should, I mean, not just somebody
Is a
who says, "Let
spiritual-
me be your spiritual master," or anything like that. But if one should accept the position of being a spiritual master only when he has been given the authority by his spiritual master, and so on. The disciplic succession goes up to Krishna. Krishna found Brahma to be an ideal student and to be nominated the spiritual master. Then Brahma went and initiated Narad Muni. And he said, you're an ideal student. Like that, it descends. So Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj found Srila Prabhupada to be an ideal candidate to be a guru of other people. And then Srila Prabhupada found a few people to be ideal gurus for other people. And like that, the qualification chain continues. So we must find a qualified. So gurus are definitely, your spiritual master is definitely there. But in general, the answer is the pure devotees of Krishna are perfect role models. They are the ones whom we should look up to as our role models, as our worshipable entities, worshipable personalities. Okay, text number 5 and 6. So, little more clarity Krishna wants to give how not to worship anybody else, especially in the modes of passion and ignorance. So what kind of characteristics are there about such people? So I'm just looking at the time and considering. Maybe I'll just skip the Sanskrit and we'll cover the Sanskrit partially. So texts 5 and 6. Those who undergo severe austerities and penances not recommended in the scriptures, performing them out of pride and egoism, who are impelled by lust and attachment, who are foolish, and who torture the material elements of the body as well as the super soul dwelling within, are to be known as demons. So, what kind of in their worship of these kind of people, the demons, the ghosts and all, what do some of the people do which is recommended not to be done? So these are some of the things. First of all is ashastra vihitam ghoram. Ashastra, they do not follow the scriptures. That is the first point. And ghoram, which means they severely do not follow the shastra and they are harmful. Ghoram means very harmful. Tapyante ye tapojanah, and they undergo such severe ghora tapas, very harmful austerities they undergo. Dambha ahankara samyukta. Samyukta means combination, or engaged in both. Samyukta, engaged in both of these. What? Dambha and ahankar, pride and ego, pride and false ego. Kama raga bala anvitah. Kama and raga, if you remember, raga means attachment and kama means severe form of attachment. So they are impelled by anvitaha, impelled by the force, the bala of kama and raga. So such people you should never worship, or neither should you become such a person. So if you see today's modern, who are these people? You look at some very, let's say, successful people. Most of the successful people are very hardworking. They work 18 hours a day. So many successful people, if you go and look, they will say, I work from the moment I get up and I keep working till I go to sleep. And they are just workaholics. Or they will be very hard taskmasters. They will be very, very strict on other people. Sometimes it is said that some of these very successful people, it is very hard to work with them. They are very strict on themselves and they are very strict on you. You have to be really very, have a really very thick skin to work with such people. So this is a description of those modern day people who are doing tremendous austerities on themselves to be so passionate about so much, to get that all that attachment. They are so attached to success, wealth, whatever may be the case, kama, raga, balanvitaha. And out of pride and out of ego, dambha, ahankara, sanyukta, I have to become successful. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to. All this is there. Okay. Now, the question, another sub question is here. To follow such people, if they are our role models, if they are the people whom we worship, why we should not do that? The reason we should not do that is because if we do that, we will become like them, right? That they are our role models. That's how we become through our association, or they force us to become like that, whatever may be the case, which means we also have to work very hard. We also have to, do all these tortures upon ourselves. Next verse, it will say what kind of tortures you do on yourself. And then the question becomes, what is the end result of all this torture that you do on yourself? So much hard work you do for what? For some ego, some pride, for something which is temporary. And here in Acharya's, one of the Acharya's commentaries, it is given that a conversation that occurred between Angad and Ravana. When Angad went to Ravana to take the message of peace, that you return Mother Sita and you take shelter of Lord Ram, you will be fine. Nothing will happen. Lord Ram will accept you as a friend. And Ravana got very mad, and he said that I will kill you. He said, let alone forget killing me, you cannot even move my leg. Angad put his leg on the floor. Then Ravana said, you little monkey, I can move your leg. What about me? My servants can move your leg. All his servants came and tried to move the leg of Angad, and they could not even move 1 inch his leg. Even his big son Indrajit came and could not move his leg. Then Ravana said, wait a minute, I will do it. And he started stepping down the throne and started to catch his leg. Then Angad said, why are you doing so much effort? You will put so much effort in moving my leg, and what will you get at the end of the day? Some pride that, see, you said I cannot move your leg, but I moved it. That's what you will get to say at the end of it. The end result of so much effort will be, you will move my leg. What good is that? Will you get a certificate? Will you get a gold medal that I moved Angad's leg? If you have to put in so much effort, put that effort in bhakti to Lord Ram, you will get eternal benefit. You will get millions and millions of gold medals, equivalent of that. So that is the example that is given. We torture ourselves. We put in so much hard work for what? For nothing, for peanuts. Same effort, if we put for bhakti, the results will be millions of times more. So next verse, again in this, Lord Krishna is describing this, that they torture their body. Karshayantah sharirastham. They torture the one who is inside the sharira. Sharirastham means one who is living inside the sharira, which means the soul. They torture the soul. Bhuta gramam achetasaha. And they are driven by a bhuta gramam, by material elements, by material things. I will get this, I will get this. And achetasaha, they have lost their mind. And mam chaiva antah sharirastham. Mam, me, Krishna is saying, they torture the Paramatma. He's referring here as the Paramatma who is in the sharirastham. So not only they have their soul that is in the sharira, but I am also in that sharira, and they are torturing the Paramatma as well. Tan vidhi asura nishchaya. They are, nishchaya means definitely such people are asuric. They are demoniac. So of course, you cannot torture Paramatma. You cannot torture Krishna, but the point he's making is, you are making Krishna disappointed. It's like when a son does bad things, the father is not tortured physically, but he feels sad, he feels disappointed. In the same way, when the son is doing all these things, demoniac things, the Paramatma inside feels disappointed. That is the meaning of Mam Chaiva Antaha Sharirastham. Okay. So the basic point of this whole discussion till verse number 6 is that one is driven by material or sense gratification. That is what is one is driven by. These kind of people are not driven by spiritual bhakti, let alone bhakti. They are not even driven by moksha, by liberation, let alone liberation. They are not even driven by goodness. They are simply driven by unregulated passion. They are not even driven by regulated passion, which is described in Karma Kanda. They are just completely animalistic. More, 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 more. I want more. So that is what they are driven by. Okay. So next we will go into text number 7. So one of the learnings from this whole discussion in your questionnaire, remember the questionnaire? One of the things is, who do you look up to as your role models? Think hard about it. Who do you really say, aha, I like this person? Whenever there is, new video about the person, maybe it's a living person and video comes on YouTube, or new article comes, or a new book comes, or whatever new thing, whatever happens, you go there. You are attracted to that person or personality. Write down the list of people who are your ideals in your life, who are your role models. Write their names down. And then you can analyze whether they are in the mode of goodness, passion, or ignorance. And that will tell you where you are. So that is the first question. And now, of course, it may be hard to find out whether they are in goodness, passion, or ignorance. Okay, they may be doing all kind of scandalous things, but you don't know yet. You may think they are a great person. So that is the risk. Okay, but anyway, try to do that exercise. That's the first questionnaire. Second one, or now will be a 7th verses. Krishna is going to give four broad categories of questions he will give you. What are they? Aharastva api sarvasya trividho bhavati priyaha yagyas tapas tatha danam tesham bhedam imam shrinu. So aharastva api sarvasya. So ahara, what is ahara? The food that you eat. So that is the one category. The food that everyone eats is of three kinds, in the three modes. Trividho bhavati priyaha. That there is one, whoever likes a particular type of food is in that particular mode. So there'll be foods in the three modes. Also, three more categories: yagyas, sacrifice that you do, the yagyas that you do, tapaha, or the austerities that you do, and danam, or the charity that you do. So four things are described here: food, sacrifice, austerity, and charity. So I translate this as FSAC, FSAC: food, sacrifice, austerity, charity. So write down this acronym, FSAC. So these will become your next four questionnaires, your four questions. So, and Krishna says, Tesham bhedam imam shrinu. Now hear of the differences in these categories, in these various areas. So the translation is, even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. The same is true for sacrifices, austerity, and charity. Now hear of the distinctions between them. So again, these become your four vectors or four categories for your self-assessment. And then you can detect where you might be generally if you did an honest analysis, and then how to become in the mode of goodness. Okay, so I want to stop here before we go into the discussion of the foods, or maybe we can do the foods discussion. Let's see. I want to pause here and see if there are questions. And depending on the number of questions, we may either go forward or not go forward. So this is the time to ask questions. And as I said, serious questions, questions that are sober, that relate to your life. Not questions like, okay, since I have absolutely nothing else to ask, let me ask this question. And maybe you can raise your hands. I see someone, Nishtha has raised her hand. She always has good questions. And you can raise your hands and we can go in that order. Oh, the hand is gone. No, it's back up. Okay. So you can raise hands and that way I'll know that there is a question pending. All right, while you think, we'll move forward. Yes, go ahead, Nishtha.
Hare Krishna. So we know that one of the 10 offenses against the holy name is to like preach to the faithless or atheistic people. But I've encountered someone who has a background in Krishna consciousness. So she's not exactly faithless, but she was offensive to a pure devotee. So how do I deal with this situation?
Okay, so I might ask you to repeat some parts of the question, but the offense is said to be to instruct a faithless person about the glories of the holy name. Okay, so it's that particular aspect. It doesn't say that it is an offense to give any kind of spiritual instruction or attempt to reach out to such people in any capacity. Okay, that's not what is mentioned. So first of all, like we had the discussion, I can't remember in which particular class, but we did have a discussion about association. Yeah, it was in one of the Bhagavatam classes, the power of association. And in that we discussed that, first of all, your own faith should be strong. Okay, like you should not be an untrained or a weak person that instead of giving your association, you may end up taking their association and become like them. So that's the sort of the minimal baseline. Okay, then beyond that, what you're saying is that that person you're talking about was offensive to the devotees and to Srila Prabhupada. Is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, so that means that person has some some issues in their faith or in their respect and acknowledgement of Srila Prabhupada as a pure devotee and maybe other devotees as well, as you mentioned. Now, first of all, the point is there has to be a certain limit, and you have a certain limit. They have a certain limit. So somebody like Srila Prabhupada or great acharyas can go and sort of have more deeper discussions with such people and still be able to transform them, to be able to show them the right path. Our capacity may be lesser, and therefore beyond a certain point we should move on. And if our goal is to go and transform people, to bring more and more people closer to Krishna, there are 7 billion people on this planet. Okay, so after a certain point, the minimal thing that we can do is to pray for them so that Krishna can change their heart. Okay, that we can do. That requires no direct interaction with the person or anything. That's the minimal we can always do. That can never stop, or that may never stop. That depends on your commitment to that person. But let's say in the interaction part, if you're really committed to the person and you want to have personal sort of some kind of outreach, you can help to build their faith, first of all, in Krishna himself. See if there's a problem there. They may have a problem with Srila Prabhupada or with other devotees, but you can first see maybe it is stemming from some lack of faith in Krishna himself or in Krishna's words, and go from there. That really depends on what are his issues, his or her issues. And then you can see as to where that person is hung up in terms of Srila Prabhupada. Why does that person think? Approach it with a like a committed person. You're very clear, you're strong, but you ask, what really is your concern? Try to find out, be genuinely open and ask them. I'll tell you, with one particular person, this happened in my own life, that one person heard some wrong, some wrong thing about someone else. And in some sort of frame of mind, that person thought, oh, this wrong thing that was done was by Srila Prabhupada. And that person's faith in Srila Prabhupada was shaken. And after some time, we happened to ask, really, what's at the root of this? And that person then shared that, I have this this thing I heard, and it was about Prabhupada. I said, really, can you show me? And that person said, yes, I will show you. Now, to show me, that person went and reread, or whatever, and then that person said, oh my God, this is not talking about Srila Prabhupada at all. This is talking about someone else. And that person apologized, of course, and apologized to Srila Prabhupada for carrying that hard feeling in their heart. And now that person is very strongly attached to Srila Prabhupada. That whole thing, Krishna just kind of converted and probably created in that person's heart, so that when that obstacle is removed, it creates more attachment than it would have been in the normal case. So be genuinely open. Approach it from more basic aspects. Don't be fanatic either, that, oh, either if you reject Prabhupada, you're my enemy. If you accept Prabhupada, you're my friend. Don't have that kind of feeling as well. Sometimes we begin to kind of have that kind of feeling in our heart as well. So don't carry it like that either.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Manoj Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. I had one question about that verse where you said about the austerities we do on ourselves. So, Prabhuji, is it really wrong? Like, many of the people who are doing austerities, they are, at least in a material sense, they are trying to make overall life better. Elon Musk created electric cars, which is better for the environment. Jeff Bezos we can send things to the most rural part in the world, and it's a good thing, I think. When earlier people were not able to get things, so my question is it really, forget about these big people. Let's say somebody is very poor and he's trying to work hard 15 hours to make his ends meet. So is it really incorrect to work harder?
You were going in one direction and then you completely changed the direction on me.
Okay, so I guess two questions.
So first of all, according to the scriptures itself, and this is right there in the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, and it's there in the Bhagavad Gita as well, Chapter 4, and we have discussed many times that whatever work that you need to do, whatever activities that you need to do to maintain your body, your survival, your family, that is definitely, you must take care of it. And by some arrangement of Krishna, by your past karma, etc., if one is in a poor situation, has to work 15 hours simply to put food on the table, well, that needs to be done. So that's not what is being meant here as an austerity. That's not the interpretation of austerity. That is simply one's past that's one situation that one has to deal with because of past activities, past karma, and one's choices in their life. Okay, so that is separate. Let's keep that part completely separate. So the austerities that are being talked about here are not to make ends meet, not to get 2 meals a day. Okay, here it is very clear. Lord Krishna is saying what kind of austerities these are. These are the austerities that are driven by Kama Raga Balanvitaha, extreme attachment, extreme lust, and out of Dambha and Ahankara. That is what is driving. Nobody has ahankar, I want to eat. You don't, that is a basic necessity of the body. You don't need any ahankar, you don't need anything. So that part is separate. So then people do austerities for these reasons. That's where I think you were going with the Elon Musks and all that kind of thing. And that is understandable. So that answer is very different from the previous answer. Okay. Now on that answer, yes, the intention of Elon Musk may be, again, Elon Musk, we're just taking an example. I don't know him at all. I have not read much about him. I don't know whether he's a good person, bad person. I don't know much. Okay. So we're just taking as a hypothetical example. Let's say person X. So if he is, creating something, if he is putting a lot of hard work to create something, there could be good uses and bad uses of the same thing. Okay. You have to see, is that person really making sure, is he putting added work or added, is he doing his part of his austerities to make sure that whatever he is creating is going to be used in the mode of goodness? Is that part of it? If it is not, then you're just blindly creating and leaving it completely in the hands of the whoever else, whether to use it correctly or badly. Like if you are a creator of a knife, you cannot, and you're like spending 20 hours a day making knives. You don't know whether the knife will be used by a surgeon to save a life, or that knife will be used by a killer to take a life. You have no idea. So if, let's say, you are building a knife in a way that it can only be used in a good way, then that is good. But you cannot say that I am making these knives and only surgeons are using it, therefore I am doing in the mode of goodness. That's not the right understanding. And that's not the case either. This was another example I was giving in some different class. I was trying to install some app, a Google Meet app. Do you remember that? And that example, and that happened to me, and I was looking at the Google Meet. I just gave the keyword meet, and I got all these very bad kind of apps. Google Meet was there, but these other apps also came up. Install all these other types of apps, meeting all these, dating people and all these illicit, which promote illicit relationships. So have the developers of the phone or smartphone done something to say that these kind of things should not happen? Do they have those moral codes? Are they trying to enforce those moral codes? What are the moral codes? Does the country say these are the moral codes our country will follow? There is no such concept. On the contrary, there is the concept of freedom of speech, and anything goes as long as you physically don't harm someone. That's the line that has been drawn. But moral lines are completely, left to the, so to say, that this is the separation of the church and the state. The morality has been completely given up by the government and given into the hands of the church, saying you manage this. But it is, the people have stopped going to the church or to any place of, where they are getting any moral instructions. When I say meet, why don't I get suggestions to install apps where I can meet good people, where I can meet saintly people? I scrolled a lot in the bottom. No such app came up. All kind of apps were about meeting to create illicit relationships, not about spiritual relationships. So that's the thing. Okay. And you must sincerely, you must really consider what was the intent of that person when he did this. Mostly you will find the intent of that person is to become successful, to become famous, to become, after a certain billion of dollars, I feel you don't care whether it is like 50 billion or 500 billion. It's all just numbers. That much money you cannot even use in your life for your own sense gratification. So beyond that, it's not about even billions. It's about the fame. It's about the followership, that when I walk in, how many people will worship me? How many people will, remember my name in history books? How will it be written? All those things take priority. That is the reason why they may be doing those 18 hours of work. Not really to make the lives of people better. and they need to consider whether they are actually making lives of people better or just giving them a knife and leaving it to them to choose whether to take a life or save a life. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhuji. That makes sense. Yeah.
So the end result is, if they are doing that, they should also put in some moral controls in that. That would be a nice thing. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Yes, there's one more question by Medha Mataji. Raised their hand.
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. And maybe if you can also, if that's okay to share your video, then that makes it a little more personal in terms of having a conversation. If not, that's totally fine.
Sure.
Okay. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. So I had a question on recently doing the jumps. So I wanted to know, like, is there any BKMs or tips you would provide us to for focus and concentration?
Okay, first of all, I can probably you work at Intel because you used the word BKM.
Yes.
This for those who may not realize, BKM is the short form. That it's an acronym that is used a lot by people in many probably industries, but definitely in Intel where I work. It's called best known method. It means that what are some of the tried and tested tips? That's what's the meaning of BKM. So you're asking about BKMs to increase focus and concentration on how to do japa. That's the question, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very nice. If possible, can you go down and grab that book called Japa by Bhurijan Prabhu? It's kept downstairs, but let me see on Amazon if I can find it and I'll share with you. There's a very nice book called Japa. That's the title of the book, written by one of the very nice disciples of Srila Prabhupada. And right here it is. Let me share my screen and let me show you this, and I'll answer your question, give you some direct answers, but I will point you to share screen. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm on Amazon.com, and this is the name of the book, Japa, by this person called Bhurijan Das. He is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, and he is a very, very, he has spent his entire life in following the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, and he has written this very nice book called Japa. And I have read this book. I have personally found a lot of inspiration and a lot of tips, lot of BKMs, as you call, from this book. Unfortunately, there is no Kindle version of it. I don't know why. There should be, and it is probably not very easily available. It is saying $36 for a copy, but in India this is available for 200 rupees. And I have this book right here with me on my bookshelf. So it's about this thick, as you can see, and it's called Japa by Bhurijan Prabhu. So it will be a wonderful thing for you to obtain this book somehow and read it. Now, coming to answering your question more specifically, see, focusing on Japa is hard. I will tell you, I have been doing Japa myself for almost 14, 15 years, and still it is a struggle. And many people that I talk to say the same thing. The important part is to not get driven by becoming very good or very perfect in the output, in our end result of doing japa, but being sincere in our input of doing japa. What does that mean? What that means is that, first of all, from my experience, I can tell you, if, let's say, how much japa, let me ask, you are doing or you are trying to do.
Is that a question?
Yes.
I would say 4 to 5, and someone had shared in before that they try to grab any time, like someone was driving and
Yeah.
wherever that. So those were like those when I try to do the similar things. So I don't keep a count really.
Okay, that's fine. So let's say you do it for half an hour, let's say, and within half an hour your mind goes off on various topics, various things, etc., goes here and there. And the one of the things to apply is that the moment you realize, aha, my mind has gone somewhere, bring it back. There is a very beautiful verse in Bhagavad Gita 6.23, which says, as the mind goes away, try to bring it back. As the mind goes away somewhere, try to bring it back. That is the best thing that you can do. Don't blame yourself. Oh, my japa is not good. Don't victimize yourself. I am a bad person or anything like that. And definitely do not give up japa. Your sincerity, just be sincere and pray to the Lord, pray to Krishna, please make my japa better. Okay, so pray to Krishna, be as sincere and as good as possible in your japa. Don't give it up, keep doing it. Another thing I will say is make up a sankalpa, a personal vow or a personal determination that I want to do this much japa every day or every week or whatever may be the case. If you are somebody who works 18 hours a day during Monday to Friday, maybe you are what we call a weekend warrior. You do your spiritual practices in the weekends because weekdays are gone in, managing the family and whatever else. So whatever is the situation, take up a sankalpa. I will do this much, whether it is on a weekly basis or daily basis, you can choose, and try to do that much, um, with these previous aspects or these previous tips that I told you. That don't beat yourself up, don't victimize yourself, do it sincerely, and take up a sankalpa. Don't give it up. Don't say, oh, it's not my cup of tea, I give it up. Japa is not a cup of tea for anyone, which means it is everyone's cup of tea. Everyone, there is no person on the planet who should say japa is not for me, or taking the name of the Lord is not for me. The Lord has not created such a human being. Okay, so it is meant for everyone, it is recommended for everyone. Just do these, take these on sincerely with a mood of humility, that I can do nice japa only if Krishna blesses me nicely. So with his blessing, whatever japa comes out of your mouth, take it as a blessing. At least I was able to do it. Even if I was able to do it inattentively, at least I was able to do it. Where was I before, when I was not even aware of the power of the holy name? Where was I before, before a previous body, maybe a cat or dog, where I couldn't even utter the name of the Lord? At least I have a body where I can utter the name of the Lord, and there are billions of people who are not doing that. At least I'm doing it, even though inattentively. So feel that gratitude in your heart. That is, so look at the take the inspiration from what you are able to do, rather than getting uninspired from what you are not able to do. And know that many people are in the same boat as you, but never give it up. So I hope that helps.
Yes.
Any counter questions?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay.
Prabhuji, can I ask you one question which is not related to this, but it's about right to die?
Right to die.
Yeah. So those people who are ill with the diseases which are, Parkinson's and things like that.
Hmm.
And some states, I think Oregon has that, right to die. I think so. So can you throw light on this? What happens to such souls when, when they...
Yeah, this is a very complex question, by the way, and there are some of these topics which are complicated. But the Shastras do not give anybody the right to take their own life. It's basically the taking your own life. You are basically asking somebody else to do it to you, and the state will not prosecute those people as a killer or as a murderer, because they are simply doing it based on your instructions, based on certain circumstances when you are very much in pain, or you want to give up your life due to bodily ailments, right?
Yes.
So that part is separate, but ultimately it's you who's taking your life. Let's put it
Okay.
that way. And with others' assistance, with whatever may be the case, is a secondary matter. And the Shastras do not allow that. There is certain amount of suffering that is in our bucket that has been assigned, and we cannot short circuit that by taking our life. So we must take that suffering as a necessary suffering, so that it is we are paying the debt. So many people commit suicides because they don't want to or unable to pay the debt. That's not the right answer. And there is no government law, as far as I know, where they will say that, okay, we can help you to die because you have a debt. Correct? There is no such law.
Yeah.
Similarly, the suffering of the body is also a debt, and Krishna has not made a law which says that because you feel hard to pay the debt, therefore you shall be able to escape. So we must. So again, now Parkinson's may be a little tricky because the mind is affected in Parkinson's. No, that's Alzheimer's. Again, I'm sorry, I'm mixing things up.
Yeah, that's
But,
dementia.
yeah. But the point is that if one has spiritual understanding, then one understands that this is happening because of my past karma, and I just need to somehow go through it somehow, and in that meantime surrender to Krishna. And when you surrender to Krishna and apply the principles of Bhagavad Gita, this is the benefit of the people who understand and apply Bhagavad Gita, that then Krishna will come and help and reduce their suffering. If they sincerely surrender to Krishna, then Krishna comes and reduces their suffering, or gives them the strength to deal with the suffering. In either case, it is good. Whether the suffering is reduced or your tolerance to tolerate the suffering increases, either way, Krishna will help, and somehow the suffering has to be undertaken. And then whenever the end of life is determined by Krishna, not by you, it will come.
Yes.
So
And
that is
probably the next life you will have, otherwise you'll have to suffer more for the next life anyways.
Yeah, you're not getting away, you're not
Yes.
like, you're not escaping really. You're just kicking the can down the road.
Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and then there is this whole aspect of becoming a ghost, and there is more suffering when people commit suicide. That's when they don't get an immediate next body, because the next body is destined after that much time only. So that much time, and in the ghost body, it is more suffering.
Yes. Okay. Oh my.
Because there is no physical body to utilize or to fulfill your senses. There is desires. Desires are there because desires come from the mind. Desires can be fulfilled through the body. But there is no body, no senses, no physical body. So you may have the desire to, let's say, be with a particular person and, enjoy with that person, but your body is not even existent. You don't have the senses to even enjoy. And then you're in a more desperate situation. It's like you're in a jail, where your hands and legs have been tied. That's a much more suffering feeling. So better to have the suffering while you have the body than to have suffering without the body. The suffering of the mind is way more troublesome than the suffering of the body.
Yes. 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 Thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah.
Okay. Any more? I think the raised hands are from previous instances. I'm going to lower them.
So Bhagavad Gita not only teaches us how to live, but also how to leave this body. And that's
Yeah, and Bhagavad Gita teaches us how also to leave the body. So there is a lot of instruction in Bhagavad Gita, and we will see actually in the Bhagavatam classes how the Pandavas leave their body in a planned way, in a Krishna conscious way. So there is a lot to learn from the scriptures.
Yes, that's true.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to stop recording at this point. I want some people maybe to share for the next 10 minutes. Some just for 1 or 2 minutes, maybe 5 people can share. So that's what I would like to request. And then I want to make an important announcement after that. So at this point, I will stop the recording. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. We will continue with the 17th chapter next week.